The celebration had lasted for 3 days across the throne world of Carvaxis. Purple banners hung from every tower, and the streets below the imperial palace filled with beings from 100 conquered worlds. They cheered because they had to. Emperor Zaltheron stood on his balcony, watching the display with satisfaction. His empire had finally done it. The last rival civilization had fallen. The Valkor Dominion now controlled everything that mattered in this sector of the galaxy. Inside the command center, Fleet Admiral Kesvar monitored the celebrations with less enthusiasm. She was a soldier, not a politician. While others drank and celebrated, she watched the screens that showed the orbital defense grid. 3,000 warships surrounded Carvaxis. 50 orbital defense stations bristled with weapons that could crack planets. Nothing could threaten them here. This was the most protected place in known space. The sensor alarm changed everything. A technician's hands froze over his console. "Admiral, we have an unidentified contact." Kesvar walked to his station, her forearms crossed in what humans might have called skepticism. Location? Directly above the Imperial Palace. Distance, 40 kilometers. Every being in the command center turned to look at the main display. The object appeared on screen, and silence fell like a weight. It hung there in space, dark and smooth. The ship looked wrong somehow. It had no visible engines, no weapon ports, no communications arrays. Just a seamless surface that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Size?" Kesvar demanded. 2 kilometers long, mass readings are inconsistent. They keep changing. "Run it through the database. All known ship designs from every species we've encountered." The technician worked quickly, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. Minutes passed. "Nothing, Admiral. It doesn't match any known design. The shape is wrong. The materials are wrong. Even the way it sits in space is wrong." Kesvar felt something she hadn't experienced in decades of warfare. Uncertainty. "How did it get past our detection grid?" "It didn't, Admiral. It just appeared. One moment nothing. The next moment it was there. That's impossible. Nothing can bypass our sensors." "I know, Admiral. But that's what happened." In the throne room, Emperor Zaltheron received the news with anger rather than fear. He had not built an empire by showing weakness. "An unidentified vessel? In my space? Above my palace?" The messenger, a small Quellan with 6 eyes, trembled as he spoke. "Yes, Divine Emperor. Admiral Kesvar requests instructions. Tell her to destroy it. Immediately." Back in the command center, Kesvar received her orders and nodded. She had expected nothing less. "All ships, target the unknown vessel. Prepare to fire on my command." The hive mind Zek representative stepped forward. The Zek were a collective consciousness that saw the universe differently than individuals. "Admiral, we should study it first. Our collective senses something unusual about that ship." A crystalline Vordan, whose people saw reality as mathematical equations, added its own observation. "The structure defies our understanding of dimensional physics. It exists in ways that our calculations say cannot be real." The Crag weapons officer, a massive being covered in natural armor plates, rumbled his opinion. "It is a threat. Threats should be eliminated." Kesvar made her decision. She was Valkor, and the Valkor did not hesitate. "Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted space. Identify yourself or be fired upon." Silence. The dark ship hung motionless in space. "This is your final warning. Identify yourself." Nothing. Not even a flicker of energy that might indicate the message had been received. "All ships fire a warning barrage. Target the space around the vessel." 200 warships opened fire. Energy beams lanced through space. Missiles streaked forward on pillars of flame. The barrage would have vaporized a small moon. The weapons converged on the area around the mysterious ship. Then something impossible happened. Every projectile stopped. Not slowed. Not deflected. Simply stopped. Frozen in space mere meters from the dark hull. Energy beams terminated as if they had hit an invisible wall. Missiles hung motionless, their engines still firing uselessly. The weapons formed a perfect sphere around the vessel, a deadly sculpture of suspended violence. What in the void? Kesevar breathed. The technician's voice shook. Admiral, those weapons are still active, still trying to reach their target, but something is holding them, something we can't detect. Increase power, full barrage, all ships. This time, 3,000 warships fired. The sky above Carvaxis lit up like a new star. Planetary defense cannons joined in, their massive weapons designed to destroy invasion fleets. Orbital stations unleashed planet-killer missiles. Enough firepower to sterilize a solar system concentrated on a single 2-kilometer target. The result was the same. Every weapon stopped. The sphere of frozen destruction grew larger, more elaborate, but the dark vessel remained untouched. It didn't even bother to move. In the throne room, Zal Theron watched the display with growing fury. How is this possible? Unknown, Divine Emperor. The vessel has technology we cannot comprehend. Then use more weapons. Use everything. I want that ship reduced to atoms. But before more orders could be given, something new appeared on every screen across the Dominion. The mysterious vessel opened a communication channel. It broadcast simultaneously to every ship, every station, every world in the Empire. The message was short. It came in perfect Valkor, spoken with absolute clarity and zero emotion. You have 30 seconds to surrender your empire. The throne room fell silent. Then Zal Theron began to laugh. It was not a pleasant sound. It was the laugh of a being who had ruled through fear and violence for so long that the concept of surrender had become alien to him. Surrender? Surrender? His voice rose to a roar that made the messenger Quellan faint. I am Zal Theron, Emperor of the Valkor Dominion. I command 3,000 worlds. My fleets have crushed civilizations that existed before your species could build fire. And you dare demand my surrender? He turned to his generals. Destroy it. Use everything, every weapon, every ship. I want overwhelming force. I want that vessel to become a lesson to anyone who dares challenge the Dominion. Kesevar received the order and prepared to execute it. Despite her doubts, she was a soldier. She followed orders. All ships, all stations, all planetary defenses. Target the unknown vessel. On my mark, fire everything. Everything. She raised one hand. Around Carvaxis, every weapon system locked onto the dark ship. Enough destructive power to end civilizations waited for her command. Mark. The sky turned white with destruction, and deep in the heart of the mysterious vessel, systems that had been designed and built in secrecy over 3 centuries came fully online. Systems that bent the laws of physics, systems that made the impossible routine, systems that had been created for one single purpose, to end empires. The 30 seconds expired. The vessel moved, but not in any way that made sense. It didn't accelerate, didn't activate engines. It simply stopped being in one location and started being in many locations. Hundreds of locations. Thousands of locations. On every major military world across 200 light-years of Dominion space, sensors detected the same thing. The dark vessel appearing from nowhere, hovering silently above their installations. The same vessel, in 1,000 places, all at once. And then, simultaneously across the entire empire, every screen broadcast the same message in every language of every conquered species. You are warned, humanity does not bluff. The word spread through the Dominion faster than light itself. On military installations across 200 light-years, soldiers and commanders stared at their screens in disbelief. The same vessel, the exact same dark, impossible vessel hovering above every major base, every fleet assembly point, every weapons manufacturing center. On the mining world of Krathvor, General Thexvan commanded the Dominion's largest arsenal production facility. When the vessel appeared above his base, he immediately ordered his defenses to fire. Plasma cannons swiveled upward. Missile batteries locked on target. Energy shields activated to maximum strength. Nothing worked. The weapons fired, but the projectiles simply vanished before reaching their target. The shields flickered and died. Power systems started shutting down in sequence, each one going dark as if someone was flipping switches. "What's happening?" Thexvan demanded. His chief engineer stared at her console with horror. "Sir, our systems are being accessed. Not hacked. Not damaged. They're being rewritten at the fundamental level. The control codes are changing themselves. That's impossible." "Yes, sir. But it's happening anyway." On Carvaxis, Emperor Zaltheron watched reports flood in from across the Empire. Every military world, every fleet, every weapon, all of them reporting the same thing. The Dark Vessel. Multiple locations. Impossible technology. "How many ships does this enemy have?" he demanded. The intelligence officer consulted her data streams. "Divine Emperor, we believe it's the same ship." "The same ship cannot be in 1,000 places at once." "No, Divine Emperor. It cannot. But it is." Admiral Kesevar studied the tactical display with the eye of someone who had fought in 100 campaigns. What she saw made no sense from any strategic perspective she knew. "This is a demonstration. They're showing us they can reach anywhere in our empire simultaneously. They're showing us our defenses mean nothing." "Then we fight harder," Zaltheron growled. "With what, Divine Emperor? Look at the reports. Our weapons don't work against them. Our shields don't stop them. They appear and disappear at will. How do you fight an enemy that can ignore every advantage we've built over millennia?" The Zek representative spoke, its collective voice echoing strangely in the throne room. "Our hive mind has touched the edges of what this vessel is. It is not merely technology. It is applied physics at a level we cannot comprehend. They are not bending the rules of reality. They are rewriting them." The crystalline Vordan added its analysis. "Our calculations suggest this vessel exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What we see is merely a projection. The actual ship is somewhere else. Everywhere else. The mathematics hurt to contemplate." "I don't care about mathematics," Zaltheron snapped. "I care about destroying it." "You cannot destroy what you cannot truly touch, Divine Emperor." On 17 different worlds, the vessels began to hum. It was not a sound that traveled through space. It was a vibration that somehow bypassed physics and resonated directly in the minds of every being who perceived it. The sound felt old, ancient, like something that had been waiting for the right moment to be heard. On Carvaxis, the palace guards clutched their weapons nervously. They were the elite, the best of the best, trained to face any threat, but they had never faced a threat they couldn't understand. Then the second transmission came. This time it wasn't just in Valcor. It was in every language, every dialect, every form of communication used by every species in the Dominion. Somehow the message reached everyone simultaneously, perfectly translated, perfectly clear. "You were warned. Humanity does not bluff." The word rippled through the Empire like a shockwave. Humanity. The name was familiar. The Valcor had scouted them centuries ago. A primitive species on a small blue world, young, barely capable of space travel. The scouts had filed their reports and moved on. Earth was classified as a pre-contact civilization. No threat, no value. Ignored. In the throne room, Zaltheron pulled up the old scout reports. The images showed cities built of metal and glass, primitive spacecraft that used chemical propulsion, nuclear weapons that were laughably weak by Dominion standards. The report was 300 years old. This cannot be the same species, not in 300 years. Evolution doesn't work that fast. Technology doesn't advance this quickly. But the intelligence officer had found something else. "Divine Emperor, there's a note in the file." The scout commander reported something unusual. He said the humans detected his ship, a stealth vessel using technology stolen from 6 different civilizations. They saw through it. They tracked it. They knew they were being watched. And he did nothing about it? He classified them as pre-contact and moved on. Standard protocol. "We've scouted thousands of primitive worlds." Kesevar felt a cold realization settle into her bones. They knew. 300 years ago, they knew we existed, and we forgot about them. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting, Divine Emperor, that while we forgot about them, they never forgot about us." 300 years. What could a species do with 300 years of preparation? If they knew a galactic empire existed, if they knew that empire conquered and enslaved, If they decided they would never let that happen to them? That's speculation, is it? Look at what they've done in minutes. This wasn't thrown together. This was planned, calculated, built specifically to counter everything we can do. On the military world of Krathvor, General Thex Van watched his arsenal go dark. Factory after factory shut down. Not destroyed, not damaged. Simply turned off as if someone had decided they were no longer needed. His communications officer suddenly straightened. "Sir, we're receiving a new transmission. It's coming from the vessel. Put it through." The screen flickered, and for the first time they saw the being behind the impossible ship. She was human. Clearly human from the old scout reports. Bipedal. Bilateral symmetry. But the look in her eyes was not the look of a primitive. It was the look of someone who held absolute confidence in her superiority. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Space Vessel, Decisive Argument. Your arsenal has been deactivated. Your weapons have been rendered inert. Your defenses have been neutralized. You have two choices. Stand down peacefully, or we will demonstrate what actual warfare looks like. Choose quickly." Thex Van's pride warred with his survival instinct. "You cannot do this. The Dominion will crush you. General, I'm going to be clear with you. We've been watching your empire for 3 centuries. We've studied every species you've conquered, every technology you've stolen, every tactic you've used. We know you better than you know yourselves. And we built these vessels specifically to end empires like yours before they could threaten us. The question isn't whether we can do this. We're doing it. The question is whether you make this easy or hard." The transmission ended. On Carvaxis, similar conversations were happening across every military installation. Some generals surrendered immediately. Others tried to fight. Those who fought discovered that the human vessels didn't retaliate with violence. They simply removed the ability to fight. Weapons stopped working. Ships lost power. Soldiers found their armor locked in place. Emperor Zal Theron watched his empire crumble in real time. World after world reporting the same thing. Surrender. Capitulation. Defeat without battle. "We still have the stellar cascade," he said quietly. Everyone in the throne room turned to stare at him. The stellar cascade was the Dominion's ultimate weapon, a bomb planted in the heart of Carvaxis's sun. If triggered, it would cause a chain reaction that would destroy the star itself. Everything in the system would die. 40 billion beings. All the conquered species gathered for the celebration. Everything. It was a weapon of spite, of final revenge. If the Dominion fell, so would its capital. Divine Emperor, Kesevar said carefully. That would kill everyone, including us. Better death than surrender to primitives. They're not primitives. That much should be obvious. I don't care. If we cannot have this empire, no one will. His hand moved toward the activation console, the console that required his personal genetic signature, the console that would end everything. Then a new hologram appeared in the center of the throne room. Captain Sarah Chen, standing as if she was physically present. Her uniform was dark blue with silver markings. Simple, practical, nothing like the ornate armor of Valkor officers. Emperor Zal Theron, "Step away from that console. You cannot stop me, human. The stellar cascade requires my genetic signature. Only I can trigger it. Only I can stop it once started. I know. We've known about the stellar cascade for 87 years. Did you really think you could hide a bomb in a star from people who were watching?" Zal Theron's hand hovered over the console. "You're bluffing. Emperor, your entire empire is currently being dismantled by vessels that can ignore physics as you understand it. We appear in 1,000 places at once. We neutralize your weapons with a thought. We speak every language of every species you've enslaved. And you think we're bluffing about knowing where you hid your doomsday device? Even if you know about it, you cannot stop it once I trigger it. The ignition sequence is unstoppable." Captain Chen smiled. It was not a comforting expression. "Emperor, I need you to understand something. We didn't come here to negotiate. We came here to end you. The fact that we're talking at all is a courtesy." The countdown began. 10 minutes until the sun died. 10 minutes until 40 billion beings ceased to exist. The display appeared on every screen in the Carvaxis system, a cold reminder of Emperor Zal Theron's final act of defiance. In the throne room, guards looked at each other nervously. Some began backing toward the exits. Others stood frozen, unsure whether duty or survival should take priority. The crystalline Vordan diplomat shattered into 1,000 pieces as its panic response triggered. The Zek collective mind fractured into individual voices, each screaming in terror. Only Captain Sarah Chen remained calm. Her hologram stood perfectly still, hands clasped behind her back, watching the Emperor with something that might have been pity. "You've killed us all," Admiral Kesevar said quietly. "For your pride, you've murdered billions." "I've denied the humans their victories," Altheron replied. "If we burn on our terms." "No," Chen said. "You burn on ours." She raised one hand and spoke a single word. "Containment." Above the system star, the human vessel that had been hovering at a safe distance suddenly moved. Not toward the star, but into it. The dark ship descended into the roiling surface of the sun as if the million-degree plasma was nothing more than water. Across the Dominion, on every world where a human vessel waited, beings watched the impossible happen. Sensors tracked the ship as it penetrated deeper into the star, past the photosphere, through the convective zone, into the radiative zone, finally reaching the core itself, where the stellar cascade bomb waited to trigger its deadly chain reaction. "What are they doing?" Someone whispered in the throne room. The countdown continued. 9 minutes. 8 minutes. 7 minutes. On the bridge of the decisive argument, Captain Chen monitored the situation with practiced calm. Her crew worked around her, beings who had trained for scenarios like this. Humans who had spent their lives preparing for the moment when Earth would have to face a galactic empire. "Status," she ordered. "Core penetration successful," her tactical officer reported. "We've located the cascade device. Configuration matches our projections from 87 years ago. Beginning countermeasure deployment. Proceed." In the heart of the star, the human vessel did something that would have been called magic by any civilization that didn't understand the science behind it. It created a pocket. A bubble of altered space-time. Inside this bubble, different rules applied. The stellar cascade began its ignition sequence, but the reaction was contained, compressed, isolated from the star around it. The countdown reached 5 minutes. Across the Dominion, scientists watched their instruments with disbelief. The humans were manipulating stellar physics. They were reaching into a sun and controlling nuclear fusion itself. Technology like this shouldn't exist. Couldn't exist. Yet it was happening. "They're containing the reaction," a Vordan scientist calculated frantically. "They've created a dimensional pocket inside the star. The cascade is detonating, but the energy has nowhere to go. Can the pocket hold? According to our mathematics, no. According to what I'm seeing, yes. They're operating beyond our understanding of dimensional physics." 4 minutes. In the throne room, Zaltheron watched the countdown with growing unease. This was supposed to be his final act, his ultimate revenge. The humans were supposed to watch helplessly as his son died. But Chen stood there calm and collected as if she was watching something routine. "How?" he finally asked. "How are you doing this?" "You want the truth, Emperor? We've been ready for you for 300 years. When your scouts found Earth, we detected them immediately. They thought they were being careful. They thought their stealth technology made them invisible. It didn't. We saw them. We tracked them. And we learned everything we needed to know. 3 minutes, we learned that there was an empire out here. An empire that conquered and enslaved. An empire that had destroyed hundreds of civilizations. And we made a decision. That empire would never reach Earth. We would make sure of it." Chen's hologram walked closer to the Emperor, her footsteps silent but her presence commanding attention. "So we watched. We studied every species you conquered, every technology you stole, every tactic you used. We identified your strengths, your weaknesses, your blind spots, and we built these vessels. 2 minutes. The Eschaton-class ships, named after the end of things. We built 12 of them in secret, in facilities that your scouts never found, using resources from parts of our solar system you never bothered to look at. It took 3 centuries. 3 centuries of preparation. 3 centuries of ensuring that when we finally met you, we would be ready. 1 minute. These ships don't just have weapons, Emperor. They have technology that bends the fundamental rules of reality. We can exist in multiple places simultaneously. We can neutralize any weapon system. We can reach into stars and prevent them from dying. We built them to do one thing: end empires before they can start wars. 30 seconds. The countdown reached its final moments. In the heart of the star, the stellar cascade completed its ignition sequence. The chain reaction began. Nuclear forces that should have torn the sun apart instead met the human containment field. The reaction tried to expand. The field compressed it. The reaction tried to overwhelm it. The field adapted. Energy that should have killed a solar system was shunted into a pocket dimension, where it would dissipate harmlessly over the next 1,000 years. The countdown reached 0. Nothing happened. The sun continued to burn as it always had. 40 billion beings continued to live. And on every screen across the Dominion, the same message appeared. Threat neutralized. Your son is safe. Zaltheron collapsed into his throne. The ultimate weapon. The final revenge. All of it had been rendered meaningless in minutes. How did you know about the cascade? He asked, his voice hollow. Emperor, we've had agents embedded in your empire for 200 years. Not infiltrators. Not spies in the traditional sense. Just observers. People who looked like other species. Who acted like them. Who lived among them. We know everything about you. We've known for a very long time. Kesevar found her voice. You've been planning this since before I was born. Yes. Humanity takes the long view. We learned early in our history that preparation prevents panic. That understanding your enemy means you rarely have to fight them. So we prepared. We understood. And when the time came, we acted. On conquered worlds across the Dominion, the human vessels began broadcasting a new message. This one wasn't for the Valkor. It was for everyone else. The message appeared in every language, transmitted to every device, heard by every being in the Empire. The voice was human, but the words were meant for the oppressed. People of the Valkor Dominion, you do not know us. We are humanity. We come from a world called Earth. For 300 years we have watched your empire. We have seen what it has done to you. The slavery, the oppression, the genocide, we watched and we prepared. On worlds where species had been conquered generations ago, beings looked up at the human vessels with confusion and hope. Today, that preparation ends. Today your chains break. The Valkor military has been neutralized. Their weapons do not function. Their fleets are powerless. Their orbital stations are dark. We have not destroyed them, because we do not believe in unnecessary death, but we have removed their ability to harm you. In labor camps across the Dominion, slaves stopped their work to listen. Guards found their shock sticks no longer worked. Fences designed to kill on contact went dead. You are free, not because we demand it, not because we will force you to be free, but because no being should live under the boot of tyrants. We offer you the chance to choose your own fate, to build your own future, to live without fear. On the manufacturing world of Krathvor, General Thexvan watched as his workers simply walked away. The slaves he had commanded for decades looked at their dead chains and left. No violence, no revenge, just departure. We are not saviors, the human message continued. We are not conquerors. We do not want your worlds or your resources. We want only one thing, to ensure that what happened to you never happens to us. And the best way to do that is to ensure it never happens to anyone else. On Carvaxis in the throne room, Chen's hologram turned to face the various species that made up the Dominion's government. As of this moment, the Valkor Dominion no longer exists as a military power. You can fight among yourselves about what comes next. You can rebuild. You can seek revenge. You can try to create something better. That's not our concern. Our concern is simple. This empire as it was is finished. What about us? A minister asked. The Valkor people? Do you plan to exterminate us? No, you're not your government. You're not your military. You're beings who were born into a system and followed it. Some of you believed in it. Some of you just survived in it. Either way, you're not our enemy. Your empire is our enemy, and that empire is gone. Zaltheron looked up at the hologram. You've destroyed everything I built. No, Emperor. We've dismantled a machine of oppression. What you built was conquest. What we're offering is a chance for something different. And if we refuse, if we rebuild, Chen's expression hardened. Then we'll dismantle it again. And again. And again. For as long as necessary. We built 12 of these vessels, Emperor. We can keep one in your space permanently if needed. A reminder. A deterrent. A promise that tyranny will not be tolerated. 3 days after the fall, the Valkor Dominion existed only in name. The governmental structure remained, but without military power to enforce its will. The empire had become a collection of confused bureaucrats sending messages that nobody answered. On every world, Local populations had begun making their own decisions about their futures. Emperor Zaltheron sat in his throne room, but it felt like a theater set now. The throne was still grand. The walls still displayed the banners of conquest. But everyone knew it was performance. The real power in the system was the dark vessel that hung in orbit. Silent and patient, Captain Sarah Chen had established a human embassy on Carvaxis. The building had gone up in 2 days, constructed by machines that assembled themselves with frightening efficiency. It sat at the edge of the government district, neither aggressive nor hidden. A simple statement, "We are here." Ambassador James Okoro arrived on the 4th day. He was older than Chen, his hair gray, his face lined with the kind of wisdom that came from decades of diplomatic service. He had been preparing for this assignment his entire life. Earth's diplomatic corps had been training for first contact since the scouts had been detected 3 centuries ago. His first meeting was not with the Emperor. It was with the representatives of the conquered species. They gathered in what had been a Valcor military briefing hall. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds. Some came with hope, others with suspicion, all of them with questions. Okoro stood before them without a podium, without guards, without ceremony. Just a human in a simple suit, facing beings whose worlds had suffered under Valcor rule. "I know what you want to ask," he began, "so I'll answer before you have to. No, we're not here to rule you. No, we're not going to establish a new empire. No, we're not going to decide your fates for you." A Quellan representative stood. "Then why are you here at all? Why not just destroy the Valcor and leave? Because destruction isn't our goal. Our goal is to ensure empires like the Dominion don't threaten Earth or anyone else. The Valcor military has been neutralized. The threat is gone. What you do next is your choice." A massive crag warrior growled his question. "You have 12 of those vessels. Ships that can ignore our weapons. Ships that can appear anywhere. Why should we trust you won't become the next empire?" "You shouldn't," Okoro said simply. The honesty surprised them. "You shouldn't trust anyone with that much power. That's smart. That's wise. That's why we're showing you exactly what we can do. No secrets. No hidden capabilities. We can neutralize military threats. We can protect ourselves. But we can't rule you. Won't rule you. Don't want to rule you. Why not?" Azek Collective asked. "Every species with power seeks to expand it. Maybe in this galaxy. But Earth learned something different. We learned that empires fall. Always. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. We learned that trying to control others costs more than it's worth. We learned that the best security isn't domination. It's ensuring others don't want to dominate you." A crystalline Vordan spoke, its voice like bells. "You claim you want nothing from us. Yet you've destroyed the political structure of 200 worlds. You've created chaos. Surely you want something in return. We want you to not attack Earth, that's it. That's the whole list. Don't threaten humanity and we'll never bother you again. That's all? That's all?" The hall filled with skeptical muttering. It sounded too simple, too easy. Beings who had lived under Valcor rule for generations couldn't understand power that didn't seek to expand. A young Quellan stood. She was the same one who had watched the prison camp fall. "What if we can't defend ourselves? What if someone else becomes the next empire? What if the Valcor rebuild?" Okoro smiled sadly. "That's where it gets complicated. We're not peacekeepers. We're not galactic police. We're just one species trying to survive in a dangerous universe. But we did learn something important. When you help others stay free, they tend to want you to stay free too. It's practical, not noble. So you will help us? We'll share technology. Not weapons, but defensive systems. We'll help with communication networks. We'll facilitate trade if you want it. We'll answer questions. But we won't fight your battles. We won't make your decisions. We won't choose your governments." On the 5th day, the real trial began. Not in a court, but in the hearts of billions who had suffered under Dominion rule. The Valcor people themselves fractured into competing groups. Some sought redemption. They went to conquered worlds and offered apologies that could never be adequate. Others fled to remote systems, trying to preserve what they could of their culture. A few plotted revenge, though without weapons, their plots were empty. Emperor Zaltheron faced his own people's judgment. The trial was held in the same throne room where he had ruled. But now he stood on the floor and his former subjects sat in judgment. The charges were read in 17 languages. Genocide, slavery, forced labor, cultural destruction. The list went on for hours. Evidence was presented from archives that the humans had somehow acquired during their centuries of observation. Images, documents, testimony from survivors. Sal Theron listened to it all in silence. He didn't deny the charges, didn't try to justify them. At the end, when asked if he had anything to say, he simply spoke the truth as he understood it. I built an empire. That is what rulers do. I conquered worlds. That is what military powers do. I enslaved populations. That is how empires function. I regret nothing because I did what I thought made the Valkor strong. I was wrong. Not morally wrong, practically wrong. I built something that couldn't survive beings who were more prepared than I was. Do you feel guilt? A survivor asked. No, I feel defeat. Guilt is for those who believe they had another choice. I had the choice I saw, I took it, and I lost. The verdict was simple. Exile. Zal Theron would be sent to a remote world alone, to live out his days without power or influence. Some argued for death, others for imprisonment. But the compromise was isolation. Let him live with his choices in silence. As he was led away, he passed Ambassador Okoro. You've won, human. Enjoy it while it lasts. It's not about winning, Emperor. It's about surviving. That's all it's ever been about. On Earth, the news spread through cities that had waited 3 centuries for this moment. Celebrations were muted. Humanity had been living under the shadow of the Dominion since the Scouts had been detected. Multiple generations had grown up knowing that somewhere out there, an empire existed that could threaten them. Now that threat was gone. In Geneva, at the United Human Space Command headquarters, Director Chen stood before a memorial wall. The wall listed names. Thousands of them. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, diplomats. All the people who had worked on the Eschaton project over 3 centuries. Most had died never knowing if their work would matter. Sarah Chen was the director's granddaughter. The Chen family had served the project for 5 generations, each one adding to the work, each one preparing for a day that might never come. They did it, an aide said quietly. Your granddaughter did exactly what the project was designed to do. She followed the plan that thousands of people spent their lives creating. She's not a hero. She's the end result of centuries of preparation. That's still heroic. Maybe. Or maybe it's just practical. We saw a threat. We prepared for it. We removed it? That's not heroism. That's survival. On Carvaxis, Captain Chen stood on the bridge of the decisive argument and looked at the world below. The celebrations were happening down there. Freed slaves dancing in the streets. Conquered species tearing down monuments to Valkor glory. It looked like victory. Captain, her first officer said, we're receiving a priority signal from long-range sensors. Deep space. Edge of explored territory. What kind of signal? Unknown. But it's artificial. Definitely artificial. And it's big. Chen felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. She pulled up the sensor data and studied it carefully. The signature was different from anything in the Valkor databases. Different from anything humanity had encountered. Analysis? Best guess? It's a vessel. Maybe a station. Hard to tell at this range. But Captain, if our readings are right, it's massive. 10 times the size of anything the Dominion built. Can you determine origin? Not yet. But Captain, there's something else. The signal pattern. It's not exploratory. It's not commercial. Our AI analysis suggests it's military in nature. Chen looked out at the stars. Beyond the Dominion. Beyond the space humanity had observed for 3 centuries. Out there in the dark, something else existed. Something they hadn't prepared for. Something they hadn't known about. How long until we can get a better reading? Unknown. The signal is intermittent. Could be days. Could be weeks. Keep monitoring. Maximum priority. And send a coded message to Earth. Tell them we found something. Should we be worried? Chen thought about the Eschaton vessels. About 3 centuries of preparation. About how humanity had built ships to end one empire. She wondered what it would take to face another. Always, she said quietly. Always be worried. That's how you stay prepared. On a dead world at the edge of former Dominion space, an ancient facility powered up for the first time in 1,000 years. Beings that were not quite alive and not quite mechanical studied the data that had just arrived. Data about the fall of the Valkor. Data about the humans who had ended an empire in minutes. 1 week after the empire fell, the galaxy looked different. Not physically, but politically. The structures that had existed for millennia were gone. replaced by confusion and possibility in equal measure. The Galactic Council convened for the first time in 800 years with actual authority. The council chamber on the neutral world of Terminus had sat empty during Valcor rule. The Dominion had claimed the council existed, had maintained the building, had even held ceremonial sessions. But everyone knew it was theater. The Emperor decided everything. The council approved it. Now beings from 300 worlds gathered in that chamber, and for the first time in living memory, they weren't sure what would happen. Without the Valcor military enforcing order, without the threat of conquest hanging over every vote, the galaxy had to figure out how to govern itself. Ambassador Okoro attended as an observer. Humanity had been offered a seat on the council. They had declined. That decision alone had caused more confusion than anything else they'd done. You defeated the greatest empire in known space, a Telvarn representative had argued. You have earned the right to lead. We don't want to lead, Okoro had replied. We want to observe. We want to participate. We want to trade and communicate and exist. But we don't want authority over others. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense if you've studied history. Power corrupts. Authority breeds resentment. We'll participate as equals or not at all. So he sat in the observer section, watching as the council tried to find its footing. The first session was chaos. Species who had been enemies under Valcor rule now had to negotiate directly. Worlds that had been forced into trade agreements wanted to renegotiate. Territories that had been conquered wanted independence. The list of grievances and demands seemed endless. On the third day of debate, a crag warrior stood and spoke what many were thinking. This is impossible. We cannot govern ourselves. We need order. We need structure. The Dominion was evil, but at least it was organized. Are you suggesting we need a new empire? Aquelin asked sharply. I'm suggesting we need leadership. Someone strong enough to keep the peace. And who would that be? You? Your people? The argument threatened to turn violent. Okoro watched tensions rise, knowing this was a critical moment. He stood, drawing attention not through force but through simple presence. May I speak? The council president, a elderly Vordan, nodded. The human observer may address the council. Okoro walked to the center of the chamber. You're asking the wrong question. You're asking who should lead. Instead, ask why you need a leader at all. The Dominion taught you that only hierarchy provides order, but Earth learned something different. We learned that networks are stronger than pyramids. What does that mean? The Crag demanded. It means you don't need one species to rule all others. You need agreements between equals. You need trade that benefits everyone. You need communication networks that include everyone. You need defense pacts that protect everyone. Not a hierarchy. A web, interconnected, interdependent, resilient. That sounds weak, the Crag said, does it? The Dominion was a hierarchy. One emperor. One military. One point of failure. We removed that point and the entire structure collapsed in minutes. A web has no single point of failure. Damage one connection, and the others maintain the structure. That's not weakness. That's intelligence. A Zek collective spoke, its voice resonant with multiple perspectives. The human is right. We have been so focused on maintaining the old structure that we haven't considered creating a new one. But how? Someone asked. How do we build this web? Slowly, Okoro said. Carefully. Start with simple agreements. Trade, communication, mutual defense. Build trust before building authority. And accept that it will be messy and imperfect and sometimes frustrating. That's not a failure. That's freedom. The council session continued for days. Arguments, debates, compromises. Slowly, painfully, the framework of something new began to emerge. Not an empire. Not even a unified government. Just agreements, protocols, understandings between species that were choosing to cooperate rather than being forced to submit. On Carvaxis, the Valcor people themselves were having similar debates. What did it mean to be Valcor without an empire? Some argued for isolation, others for integration with the new galactic order. A few still dreamed of reconquest, though without weapons, their dreams were hollow. Admiral Kesevar found herself in an unexpected position. The military was gone, but someone needed to organize the transition. She had spent her life following orders. Now she had to figure out what orders to give. She met with Captain Chen in the human embassy. The two warriors sat across a simple table, tea between them. Earth tea, Chen explained. A gesture of hospitality. Your people hate me, Kesvar said. I commanded the fleets that enforced the Emperor's will. I'm responsible for atrocities. Probably, Chen agreed. So what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I can't undo what I've done. I can't bring back the dead. I can't erase the suffering. No, you can't, but you can choose what happens next. You can help your people transition. You can stand trial if that's what's needed. You can work to build something better. You have choices now. What will you choose? Kesevar looked at her hands. Four-fingered hands that had ordered weapons fired on countless worlds. I'll help transition the military remnants to civilian authority. I'll testify at the trials. I'll take responsibility for my actions, and then I'll accept whatever judgment comes. That's more than most conquerors would do. It's less than I owe. On Earth, in the cities that had prepared for 3 centuries, life was changing. The threat was gone, but the vigilance remained. The deep space signal continued to concern the Space Command. Whatever was out there, it was getting closer. Director Chen reviewed the latest reports with her senior staff. The signal had been identified as multiple sources. Multiple vessels. All heading toward former Dominion space. What do we know? She asked. Not much. The signature doesn't match any known species. Size estimates suggest vessels larger than anything in our databases. Travel speed indicates FTL technology different from what the Valkor used. Could they be refugees? Explorers? Possible. But the formation suggests military organization. They're traveling in a fleet pattern. Time until they reach known space? At current speed, 6 months. Director Chen nodded slowly. Continue monitoring, increase sensor coverage in that vector, and start preliminary design work on next-generation vessels. If the Eschaton class was built to counter the Dominion, we need to think about what comes after. Director, we just finished a 3-century project. You want to start another one? I want to never be caught unprepared again. The galaxy is bigger than we thought. We were lucky with the Valkor. We studied them for 3 centuries before we had to face them. We might not get that luxury next time. On the decisive argument, Captain Chen stood in her ready room looking at a holographic display of the galaxy. Humanity's territory was small. The former Dominion space was larger but chaotic. And beyond all of it, vast regions remained unexplored. Her first officer entered without knocking. They'd been through too much for formality now. Captain, we've received confirmation from the other Eschaton vessels. All 11 are reporting similar signals. Whatever's coming, it's coming from multiple directions. Coordinated? Possibly. Or possibly multiple groups that happen to be heading toward the same general area. Neither option is comforting. No, Captain. Chen turned from the display. What do you think, Marcus? We spent 3 centuries preparing for the Valkor. We won. Mission accomplished. Should we declare victory and go home? Marcus considered the question carefully. I think we learned something important, Captain. Preparation isn't a destination. It's a process. We prepared for the Valkor and it worked. Now we need to prepare for what comes next. Even if we don't know what that is, especially if we don't know what that is. On a freed world at the edge of former Dominion space, a young Quellan sat with her mother and watched the stars. The prison camp was being dismantled. The guards were gone. The chains were broken. Freedom tasted strange after a lifetime of slavery. What happens now? The daughter asked. We rebuild. We remember. We make sure it never happens again. How? By being ready. By not trusting that someone else will protect us. By learning from the humans. What did the humans teach us? The mother thought about it carefully. They taught us that the best defense isn't walls. It's preparation. They taught us that you don't have to conquer to be strong. You just have to be ready. And they taught us that freedom isn't given. It's maintained. Every day. Forever. In the council chamber on Terminus, the first major agreement was reached. The Mutual Defense Protocol. Not a military alliance under one command, but a series of bilateral agreements. If one signatory was attacked, others would respond. Not because they were forced to. Because they chose to. Ambassador Okoro watched as representatives from 40 species signed the protocol. It wasn't perfect. It would need revision, but it was a start. A foundation for something that might eventually become a true galactic community. The Zek Collective approached him after the signing. Ambassador, a question. Why did humanity share the technology for the containment fields? The ones that stopped the stellar cascade? That technology is incredibly valuable.